I'm Father Dwight Longenecker, and this is the sixth episode in my series Myths, Monsters, and the Mysteries, in which I'm bringing together my various enthusiasms. First of all, myths, my enthusiasm for stories, film, cinema, the hero's quest, narratives, literature of all sorts. And monsters represents my interest in the paranormal, in parapsychology, the supernatural, and also psychology, and that great fascination we all have with what's on the other side, what's on the other side of death, what's on the other side of this visible world and the invisible realm. And then the mysteries, which is the category of my Catholic faith. I'm a Catholic priest, and the mysteries are the sacraments that we celebrate in the Catholic Church, the Eucharist, baptism, and so forth. But the mysteries is also a category for the stories about Jesus in the Bible, the stories about from the Old Testament, the stories of the saints, the stories of our whole faith, and we call this the mystery of God's work in the world. And so the mysteries, therefore, stands for the connection between the myths, the monsters, and the Catholic faith. And the reason I'm enthusiastic about recording this and sharing these videos with others is because I feel that the Christian faith in the modern world has kind of been reduced to what some people call moralistic therapeutic deism. In other words, moralism, simply a list of rules and regulations to be good, to be nice, to be respectable. Therapeutic, in other words, a system to make yourself better, a system to help with your broken marriage or your difficult teens or your self-esteem issues or whatever. And then deism is the philosophy that there is a God, but he's really out there somewhere and he's just sort of having a nap. He's not really involved in this world. Well, moralistic therapeutic deism is a kiss of death for religion as far as I'm concerned, because real religion connects us with the supernatural, it connects us with the other side, it connects us with all that is both dark and light in the other side, both the monsters and the angels, if you like, both demons and angels, the bright and the dark on the side of the supernatural. But also, the way we connect with these things in religion is actually through myth, through stories, through narrative, through ritual, through drama, through ceremony. And this is really a lively and an enlivening, interesting part of my life, and something I like to share with others, because I think in the popular culture, myth is still very much alive in fantasy literature, in superhero literature, in superhero films, and so forth. And therefore, it should also be alive in religion, in the stories we tell in religion, and the way we actually live out our Catholic life. And so, if you are interested in these things like I am, I hope you go back and look at the first 5 episodes of Myths, Monsters, and the Mysteries, where I talk about the relationship between these three in general terms. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the idea of the orphan hero or the foundling hero, using Luke Skywalker as a prime example. So Luke Skywalker, and who doesn't remember Luke Skywalker? He's been categorized by Empire magazine, the movie magazine, as one of the top 50 film heroes in all cinema. And Luke Skywalker is a classic example of the foundling hero, the orphan hero. And that's because George Lucas, of course, was very influenced by Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist who wrote the classic book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And George Lucas studied Campbell's book, actually knew Campbell, and understood from Campbell's book this hero's quest, the plot outline for all of the great myths down through the ages. And Campbell believed that all of the great stories had this dynamic of the hero's quest within it. And one of the marks of many of the heroes in many of the myths, in many of the cultures all over the world for thousands of years, has been the orphan hero, the hero who is has an unusual birth, a supernatural birth, a strange birth, and is found by simple parents and brought up in unusual circumstances, and then goes on to his great heroic quest. And Luke Skywalker fulfills this like many others, because if you remember, at the beginning of the first film, Luke is living with his aunt Beru and Uncle Owen on a moisture farm on the planet Tatooine. Now, this is the Star Wars equivalent of Dorothy growing up on Uncle Henry and Aunt Em's farm in Kansas. Okay, there's another orphan hero from popular literature. And the orphan hero crops up time and time again. It doesn't take any of us very much time to realize that these orphan heroes are there all across popular literature. Superman, the classic superhero, comes from the planet Krypton, and his name is Kal-El. And he is sent by his parents before Krypton is destroyed in a cataclysm, and he lands on Earth and is raised by Martha and Jonathan Kent on their farm out in Smallville. Another classic example would be Spider-Man, Peter Parker, who's raised by Uncle Ben and Aunt Martha. And if you go to literature as well, Huckleberry Finn, who's an orphan, who's being raised by these two spinster ladies, and he goes off on his great search for his father and for his identity. In Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist and Pip from Great Expectations, and the list could go on and on. You can think of plenty of orphan heroes as well. And the curious thing to me is how these orphan heroes, or what could be called the foundling hero, is present through world myth and world literature in many different ways and in many different cultures all across the world. And in Otto Rank's famous book about the hero, he actually writes about the orphan hero, and he says in this little passage, which I'll share with you, he sort of summarizes the different themes of the orphan hero in mythic literature. And he says, the hero is the child of most distinguished parents, usually the son of a king. His origin is preceded by difficulties, such as continence or prolonged barrenness. Maybe his mother is a virgin. During or before the pregnancy, there is sometimes a prophecy foretelling in a dream or in some other way the greatness of this child and the greatness that he is destined for. As a rule, he is surrendered to water in a box or in a basket, and then he is saved by either animals or lowly people, shepherds, and is suckled sometimes by a female animal or by a humble peasant woman. After he has grown up, he finds his distinguished parents in a highly versatile and strange fashion. He takes his revenge on his father on the one hand, and he is acknowledged on the other as a great hero and accomplishes great quests, goes on great quests. So he summarizes these different heroes that crop up in different cultures around the world. And I'm just going to share some of you because some of the similarities between them in vastly different cultures hint at some kind of a strange origin of them all, because they connect with some amazing details. So one of the most ancient myths we have comes from ancient Babylon, 2000 BC, and it's the story of the founder of the great city Babylon, Sargon. And it says there that he was brought forth in a hidden place, and his mother laid him in a vessel made of reeds, closed the door with pitch, and dropped her into the river. And the river carried him down until he was found and adopted by the royal household and became the king himself. Now, how remarkable that's, if you remember your Bible story, is the same story of Moses, only Moses is born of humble parents, humble Hebrew parents, and he's also put into the river Nile in a basket covered with pitch to save his life. And he's discovered by the princess of the sister of the Pharaoh, who takes him back and is brought up in a royal household. Well, this same theme of the child being put into the river or put into the sea in a box crops up again in India with the legend of Karna. And Karna was put by his nurse into a basket of rushes and placed a lid on it and lined it with wax and floated the boy down the river until he was found and adopted by the royal household and brought up by the king. The same thing occurs in the Greek myth of Oedipus. Slightly different. This time he's exposed in the river by his father so that he might die, but he's discovered by a shepherd family and brought up. Eventually, if you know the Oedipus story, he mistakenly kills his father and marries his mother inadvertently. And the story of Paris, also one of the Greek legends, the story of Hercules and Perseus. Some of the Hercules, the Roman hero, also has an unusual birth and is a foundling and goes on to do great things. So, why do these stories from 2000 BC in Babylon, echoing all the way down through many different cultures? And those are just a few examples. There are many more. Why do they occur so frequently? What's going on? Well, there are important things happening in these stories which connect with us at a very deep level. So, for instance, Luke Skywalker, again, and he follows the same pattern, is the orphan hero who is going on this great quest. And novelists, storytellers, screenwriters will say, well, we do this for one practical reason, and that is that we're trying to establish empathy between the audience and the hero. And one of the best ways to establish empathy is to make the hero an orphan who doesn't have empathy for a lost child, who doesn't have a heart that goes out to a child from a broken home, a dysfunctional family. And again, if you think back through the stories that you've read, the films that you've watched, how many of the heroes come from are situated in a broken home, a broken marriage, a single mom, an orphan being brought up by aunts and uncles or relatives, or totally alone in the world. Okay, this establishes empathy between us and the hero. So that's one of the practical reasons that the hero is so often an orphan hero. But of course, the psychologists will tell us there's something else going on here as well. That part of the human quest and part of the human journey is the journey of self-discovery, to examine our own lives and examine our own identity and find out who we really are. And therefore, we are on a search for the lost parents, because they will help us to know who we are. And they therefore symbolize our own lost identity, our own mysterious identity that we have yet to discover. And this is summarized, most of all, therefore, by the search for the Father. And time again, you'll find that the hero actually has father issues, and he's on the search for his father. And the father character is so interesting because it's ambiguous. Is that father character the good, loving, kind, generous father that we all long for? Or is the father actually an evil person, somebody who's abandoned us, like Oedipus's father has abandoned him and threatens him? Is the father an evil character? Is the father wicked? And as Luke Skywalker discovers, Darth Vader is his father. Who can forget that tremendous reveal in the second movie where Darth Vader says, "I am your father." So all of this plays out in story after story. Huckleberry Finn, who discovers his father to be a drunkard, and he discovers him after he's already dead for a couple of days. What a shock that is. And so time and again, the ambiguity of the father figure echoes into these stories, and it's there in our current society. Patriarchy, the fatherhood, has a bad name in our society, and yet don't we all long for the loving father, the kind father, the good father, the generous father, the perfect father? We have this love-hate relationship, this struggle. And the orphan hero, the foundling hero in films, in novels, in myth, echo this longing within the human heart to look for the Father, to find the good and the loving Father. One of the other film series where this comes out is in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the hero there is also looking for his father. The second film was all about the search for the father. It's a hugely entertaining film and amusing, but there's that deep theme within it all, which is running through that and so many other films about finding our true identity in our Father. Now, where does this connect with the mysteries? Well, this is why the Christian story also is so interesting, because Jesus Christ also has this same sort of dynamic going on in the story of Jesus' birth. There he is, and we believe that he is the Son of God who comes down from heaven, and he is born into a simple, humble family, Mary and Joseph in Nazareth, which is a tiny little village, and is brought up as a son of a carpenter. That sounds like Superman being sent down from Krypton in his little basket to be brought up by Martha and Jonathan in Smallville, and there's Frodo Baggins, who's in the Shire, the countryside with the simple folk. Again, an orphan being brought up by his uncle Bilbo, and before he sets out and goes in this great quest. So. This story echoes in the story of Jesus, in the gospel story. And Jesus then goes on this great quest to overcome evil and lays down his life to do just that. So, is the story of Jesus just another myth? Well, this is the amazing thing, that we actually believe that the story of Jesus Christ is historical. Were elements added to the story later? Well, it's difficult to believe that, because the Gospels would have been written within certainly at least 60 years of the death and resurrection of Jesus, but probably more like 20 or 30 years after his death. There wasn't really enough time to add lots of mythical elements to it. So, as C.S. Lewis discovered, the Jesus story of Jesus operates on us like any other myth, except that it really happened. And not only is the story of Jesus' birth and life and death and resurrection mythical in this sense, in other words, a narrative, it's a story that has these deeper meanings, and that it really happened, it's historical, but Jesus himself tells a story about the search for the Father. And you might remember the story of the prodigal son, where a man has two sons, and the younger son claims his inheritance and goes away, and he wastes it all in riotous living. And then he ends up in a pig pen and says, the servants in my father's house actually have it better than I do. I think I will go home and I will return to my father. Well, there is the whole father story played out in a story that Jesus tells, a parable that Jesus tells. And the father figure there, of course, is not a frightening or fearsome character, but a loving character who waits for the son to come home. He doesn't go and find him. He doesn't take him by the ear and say, come home, you've been a wicked person. He just waits. He just waits for the son to come to himself and to come home to the loving father. And so this story of the search for the father, the orphan hero, echoes down through culture after culture and myth after myth in many, many different ways, and then comes to us through the Christian story, and comes to us through Jesus himself, who tells this tremendously moving story about the son who runs away and then comes home again to the loving Father. And so this is where I see the Christian story not being just and the Christian religion not being just a set rules of rules and regulations and some sort of boring therapy to make us nicer people, but actually connects with these deepest elements of our human psyche, the deepest elements of our human culture, the deepest elements of who we are as people, because each one of us also are on this search for self-identity, on this search for the loving Father, on this search for the love that really all of us long for, the love that we find as we make that journey home. Well, I hope you'll stay tuned and watch some of the other videos that I'm going to produce about similar themes in mythology and in literature and in religion, and that you'll subscribe to the series. That'll help to get the word out there and share it with others. Also, that you might want to go over to my blog, dwightlongenecker.com. I have podcasts there. I have further video content. I blog almost every day about matters of religion and culture and literature and all the things that I'm really enthusiastic about. So come over and join me there. Browse my books and be in touch. Maybe join it with one of my online courses, and hope to see you at dwightlongenecker.com. Thanks for watching.